Hello, public speakers. I am so honored to be here today with someone who I'm starting to consider a friend, Chevy Cook. So, welcome, Chevy.
Hey, thanks for having me, y'all.
Yeah, we are excited to hear. The university knows, the world knows that it's time that we start to educate ourselves and learn about cultures we don't know about situations we don't know about, and start using our voices. And something that we do in public speaking is at the university is we provide a safe opportunity and a safe place for students to express themselves, to voice their ideas and their opinions about things, and to prepare them to actually express them to the world. And so we know that the Black Lives Matter movement has been a big deal over the summer. And I know that many of our students at the University of Arkansas have been involved in that to some extent. Some Black students, some white students, all the other ethnicities have been involved and hurt by this in some way. Um, but we've all been affected, and we can't help but to be affected by it. And so, before we go any further, I want to tell you guys why Chevy, why he's here, why I chose him. Um, he's in the military. He went to the U.S. Military Academy at West Point. Like, he's kind of a big deal. And I think that it's important. No, stop. I think it's important that we recognize this, that you're not just somebody that we've pulled just randomly to talk to, but you're somebody who you have proven yourself to um, be a man of honor and somebody who's fought for our country. And you guys we're not going to go into Chevy's background so much in his childhood, but it makes him who he is. He is resilient. He has just proven himself to be a voice of reason and one that we should listen to. I have like a list of things. He's working on his doctorate, so it will be Dr. Chevy the next time we talk, probably. And you're the co-founder for the nonprofit Military Mentors. So that shows me that, okay, you're a military man, like you got that going for you, but you also have a heart that is caring and concerning for others. And I think that when we talk about race, and I think you'll agree, that's where we have to come from. And today we're just going to talk briefly about how, coming from that place in our hearts, how we can correctly speak about this without causing more harm than we're doing. And I want you to speak to the students that identify as white, and the students that identify as Black and Latino, and our Islanders, and all across the board, or maybe the ones who don't identify as anything. How can we all use our voices? So I'm going to jump right into questions. Is that good?
That's fine with me. Let's go.
Okay, so something that the university has been talking about is maybe some of our Black students don't feel seen, they don't feel heard on our campuses, and maybe they feel overlooked and like they aren't well represented on our campus. So for these students, and keeping this class in mind in public speaking, how can students use this class, this platform, as a way to craft their ideas and express their thoughts about this?
So I think for all of us, first, we must figure out how we identify, right? So, when you're doing public speaking, when you're engaging with others, there's you, the messenger, then you have the message between you, and then you have the receiver, right? And we obviously have to worry about who the receiver is, our audience, because how we craft our narratives and our words, it matters who the receiver is. But a lot of times we tend to forget who we are and
Mm-hmm.
how we identify before we start crafting the message. So I think the first step therein is figuring out who you are, how you identify. There's kind of language ideas around how you identify, whether you identify as Black or African American can
Mm-hmm.
be a difference with your approach, or whether you want to be identified as a person of color, et cetera, et cetera. Whether you want to specifically identify with an ethnic heritage from the Latinx community, like Mexican or Puerto Rican
Mm-hmm.
or Dominican, rather than just a Latinx or a Latina or a Latino. So I think it starts with self, right? Figure out, let me see how I identify truly, and let me be clear to the others on the receiving end of my messages. This is how I identify.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think just as a note to this answer, I don't think the external environment, if I'm a true minority, like if I'm a, really, I don't see a lot of representation of myself around me. I don't think that is as impactful on how you self-identify as we may think. I think you can. I think you can identify yourself right there in front of the mirror. Who
Mm-hmm.
are you? And not need a whole lot of representation. One of the more, and that might be controversial, so let me explain it a little bit. One of the more interesting pieces of advice I have given over time. Listen, I went to West Point, I went to Columbia University, I went to the University of Texas El Paso, and now I go to Tufts. I've always been like the only black guy in the room. In my doctoral program, I'm the only black male student. All right. At Columbia, I was the only black male in my program. At West Point, I was one of a very small minority, et cetera. At UTEP, as you can imagine, the Latin community was the Latino and Latina community was the majority there. And I was, even as a person of color, I was still a very small minority there. So in all of these situations, I've been kind of a one of one or just a few. And in those instances, I've given this advice. If we were to think less about being the only one and think more about being the go-to one, that might change our perspective of how we interact with others. So again, if I'm the go-to one, if people can rely on me, people think have some type of intellect, people think I care, people can give me a task and I can knock it out of the park. I don't think they care about my visage and how I look. I think they care that guy because I identify as a gentleman, that guy I can go to every single time. So I'd rather be the go-to one than just think of myself as the only one. And that then shapes how I interact with others. So I hope that helps.
Right. I definitely think that helps because before we can be good public speakers, we have to have a solid stance. And that's my hope in recording this, is that if there's a student that's like, I don't know how I feel about this, or I don't know how I identify, like, it's going to be hard and almost impossible for you to speak about that if you are confused to begin with. And I think you gave some great tips there that, we bring so much more to the table as a person. And I think that that's what we're trying to do as a country, is start identifying as people and understanding people, because it doesn't matter what color you are. I know a lot of people who've grown up super poor in communities where the chances of them getting to go to college was like slim to none. And like they're super disadvantaged too, and they may be any race. And so I think that you're just so on point with just being clear on who you are, but then also knowing that, like, yeah, you are this color, but you bring so much more. And that you said something, that you're the go-to, right? One of my students asked, if you are interested in learning more about a person's, he said culture. So a lot of times that is connected to our race. So like, if you're wanting to know more about a certain race and a certain culture, like, how do you approach that with somebody? And I think that obviously I think you're approachable because I sought out this interview with you. But do we just like get a feel for somebody and go ask? Like, how do we do that?
So I think that's part of it, right? At least in my military exposés overseas, they taught us that in a lot of different ways that we had to have some type of cultural competency, right? I'm in a special operations community. They taught me Arabic. I spent a lot of time in North Africa and all throughout the Middle East. So, they taught me language, and, they got me to understand the Islamic religion, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, to try to understand the culture as a whole. And a lot of us, me included, went into those situations like, yes, I have some cultural competency in this area. I have walked back away from that term, cultural competency. I don't necessarily like it. I like cultural humility in a different in a different sense, in a different way. And I bring this terminology up because you can, there's tons of reading we can do right now, like especially with the BLM movement. Ibram X. Kendi's How to Be an Anti-Racist is out there, or Stamped from the Beginning. There's Robin DiAngelo's White Fragility. There's just a whole host of, Michelle Alexander's The New Jim Crow. There's all kinds of stuff out there we can read, and that makes us more competent.
Right.
But again, that's seeking cultural competency versus seeking cultural humility. And while I think all that reading is important, is also why I bring up those books. I think from a certain standpoint, we need to go in knowing we have all of these blind spots, and knowing that if I just come to a person humbly seeking knowledge, that's how it's going to work itself out, probably in the best way. And it's one way to come to a crowd or to come to a person and say, hey, I read all this stuff, and I'm trying to verify or deny these facts that I found out about your culture. Then it's another one to say, like, look, I've been reading this stuff because I want to be well-versed as a public speaker. I want to be a better human, a better person, a better local leader. But you know what? I just don't know. So can we just get to know each other? Can we sit down and have a coffee? Or if you're not into coffee, can we go eat a pizza? Or, okay, if you're not into that, can we go do a slight jog or a walk together? And let's just get to know each other. And I'm not here to write down your autobiography, but I just want to authentically know who you are. And it goes beyond that too. If we were to step outside of our little bubbles on social media, in our neighborhoods, if we reached out to those people that we actually want to know and invited them to our dinner table, got our kids interacting with each other, we'd actually see a lot of cultural things, if we were humble enough to do that, that just would crop up, and you could just simply ask questions like, I never know, we don't do this in our house. Why do you guys do that stuff? And then, if you really know the person, if they really get to know you, then along their ways, they would know, well, this person is kind-hearted and good.
Right.
And this is not just, writing down every note of these people like this type of food and then like to cook it this way. It's, no, they're just genuinely interested and genuinely culturally humble. So that's what I would offer there.
Right. And in any culture, you're going to find these people that welcome you in with open arms. And before I taught the university, I taught high school ESL, which was English as a second language. And I got invited to all of the, a lot of Catholic events. I'm not Catholic, so I got invited to some Catholic things. I got invited to birthday parties and graduation parties. And I went to a Marshallese church service. And I think that relationships is the foundation to learning more. And like you said, reading, obviously, we can't ever underestimate the power of educating yourself through books. Okay. But that relationship's really important because we get to learn about cultures and different traditions within different families too. So I think that's a really great answer and really helpful in approaching that with humility, as in I don't know everything, because I know that there's been a lot of comments like somebody who's white saying I know, I understand, and those are very triggery, because it's there's no way I could understand. I can understand poverty, I can understand being hungry, I can understand not making, not being able to pay my bills. I can understand those things that were negative in my past, but I can't understand being Black or, I African American. I will never experience that. And so to say I know and I understand would be the ignorance that, we don't want to approach somebody.
I think another interesting way to look at it, that, this tends to be touchy for people, right? Hey, there's no way I can understand what it means to be a Native American or somebody from Singapore, and it can, walk a whole lot of different lines, but it's usually the difference between being white and being Black. And those are terms I'm just going to use from now.
Right.
Being Caucasian or being African American. Those are the ones that get real touchy. And we get, so up in arms about it. But I wonder if we could think about it from this perspective. When I'm married, I have a wife, been with the same woman since high school, almost 22 years. I don't know her totally, and I've been around her for over 2 decades since we were teenagers, right? But one thing I will, I tend to not say to her is, I completely understand what you're feeling. Like, no, I don't know what it means to be a
Right.
woman, right? I've never been a woman in my life. In the idea around being either sympathetic or empathetic to somebody's plight, situation, condition, etc. We tend to use words like, I understand or I know, and really you really don't, because
Right.
we only see through these eyes the world around us, right? So I think if we can like get it and really understand that, well, I can't really, if I'm married or, if I have kids, I can't really truly, I would never say, I know exactly how you feel. I know, no, you don't.
Right.
No, the Apple has not created like a little plug for here that goes directly into somebody's heart, or a plug for here that goes directly into somebody else's
Right.
head. And until we get to that point, which I will be long gone by the time they do that,
Mm-hmm.
um, it's realistic to come from a place of humility and try to ask, as opposed to think that we honestly know. So I never use the words like, I completely understand where you come from. No, I don't.
Right. So in this class and all the public speaking courses at the university and probably beyond, there's the informative speech that everybody gives. That's pretty clear, like inform them of
Mhm.
something. But then there's the persuasive speech. So
Yeah.
in this time, if you could persuade, or if you were this student in my class and you really had racism and equal rights and all those things on your mind, and you could persuade the audience to do one thing, what would you persuade them to do?
Interesting. Wow, that's a tough one. First, let me answer a meta question that you actually asked, that I hope you recognize once I display it. You realize you asked it. So you use the words persuade,
Mm-hmm.
vice influence. There's a book by the name of The Art of Influence.
Mm-hmm.
It's by a gentleman named Chris Widener, who's done a lot of research in this topic. There's other things out there, Cialdini's
Mm-hmm.
stuff as well about influence. But I really like how he differentiates persuasion versus influence. And he says persuasion is something you do to somebody, while influence is something that they do to themselves. So in the way I remember that is, persuasion is like
Mm-hmm.
push, he
Yeah.
starts, and the influence is within another person. It's something they're doing. So how you shape, mold, and present information will help them change their thoughts, beliefs, and actions,
Right.
hopefully if you're influential. So I would start from there. I would want to be more influential
Mm-hmm.
than persuasive. With regard to this topic specifically, I've not heard anyone else talk about social justice and everything else that's going on right now from this perspective. So this is my own.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, I guess, gaining some traction. This is what I would try to influence others to understand in this space. I think these are issues of leadership. Okay, any ism, racism, sexism, all of the isms
Mm-hmm.
are a two-part leadership challenge. I would invite everyone to try to think about it from this perspective, and then try to influence others to think about it from this perspective as well. So if you are a person, we all have biases, okay? Our brains work off of biases, algorithms, and heuristics. And it's just the little ways we, piece the world together. And then over time, we aggregate habits that say, hey, when this situation happens or I see this thing, I'm going to act that way so I don't have to think about it. So we're all susceptible to that.
Right.
So the individual leadership challenge with regard to social justice, stereotyping, discrimination, all of that stuff that's happening is a failure of individual leadership. And let me explain to you why. If you let your implicit biases become explicit, you let your kind of individual beliefs become microaggressions in the office. You let some tainted belief that you read somewhere else in some news media, on some social media meme or whatever, then come out of your mouth where it's affecting someone in a negative way. I think that's truly a failure of your individual leadership. You couldn't control your own behavior, and now it's affecting those around you. So that's the one side of this stuff that's going on that I don't think people are really looking at.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Then there's the other side, which is organizational leadership. So you can be a person of good moral standing, follow the right ethics, have honor, integrity, care about your fellow person. You're a good global citizen that
Mm-hmm.
cares about people's colors and ethnicities and religious backgrounds and all of that. But if you're a bad organizational leader, when John Doe X says something unscrupulous and bad as a joke in the office and you just kind
Mm-hmm.
of walk on past it,
Right.
fair as an organizational leader. If you don't instill, if you don't have mission, values, and other things in your office that says we do not tolerate this and it's not clearly aligned, right? It's supposedly understood but not clearly laid
Right.
out. You have failed as an organizational leader.
Mm-hmm.
We can walk through an airport, for example, or a subway terminal, and if you see something, say something, right, with a bag.
Yeah.
But we can't do that with people, all right? Like when the sexist stuff happens, when, you know, Joe Beth is the only female in the room and all the guys are talking, and every time Joe Beth tries to speak up, these three dudes always over talk her or shoot her message down, and you as an organizational leader don't say anything. Failure of organizational leadership. So that's how I look at these issues as
Mm-hmm.
an influencer. I'm trying to get people to see it from the perspective of, and you know, this is either an individual leadership challenge, an organizational leadership challenge, or a confluence of the two. I hope that was pretty influential.
I think so. I mean, and I think that I'm kind of like wrapped up in what you were saying, but I think a lot of times when we want to make change and we want to make a huge impact, that's kind of like where we want to jump to, is making this huge ripple effect, when really we need to examine our lives. And um, yes, there is this platform that the students listening that you guys have, and it's going to give you the opportunity to voice that. But what you know, what you're hoping to have the influence on them, you know, is to examine your life and do those little things too. Because I mean, it's just like, I know I'm Christian, and so the word hypocrite is thrown around a lot. um, and you
Mm-hmm.
don't want to be a hypocrite. You don't want
Mm-hmm.
to be giving a speech, posting on your social media, and then not living that in your everyday life. So I think that while you do have the platform here and you can and will use this, that credibility as a speaker is far
Super,
more important than what you say.
super important. And you know, when I'm giving these talks over the last couple of weeks to large and small crowds, individuals, you know, they always ask me for tips about what I can do. And I've said the same first tip every time: do a clear-eyed self-assessment of who you are, right? And I tend to use this graphic that shows it's a person looking in the mirror and they're crying, and then the image in the picture is actually it looks kind of demonic. It's really shocking. The picture in the mirror, that is, and they're looking at themselves, and that's why they're crying, because what they see in the mirror is not necessarily who they thought they were, maybe, and it's a little scary looking, right? And that shock, for me, I use it for a specific reason, because hey, sometimes we're going to look in the mirror and we're going to say that I didn't think that was me, if we truly, really do get introspective and we do get people around us, right? It's not just you in your own head in the mirror, you know, that kind of
Right.
image. It's also having people you care about, people you trust say, hey man, hey homegirl, like when you say this, like it comes off this way, and you really being open to that. I
Yeah.
also tell people as they're doing that clear-eyed self-assessment, hey, if you're walking through your neighborhood and you see somebody that's got a Black Lives Matter sign in their yard and you have a certain reaction to it, whether positive or negative, kind of make note of why you did that
Why?
way. Or if you see somebody flying a pride flag outside of their door and you're driving past their house and like, you know, if you have a reaction to it, that's part of the self-assessment. Why are you having these reactions? Why are you, you know, getting, oh, as somebody gets in the elevator with you, you're shifting to a side or you're changing where your purse is or whatever it may be to an external influence. That's when we need to really, you know, do a self-assessment, say, hey,
Mm-hmm.
why am I doing these behaviors? And a lot of us, we simply don't want to do that because we don't want to know how
Right.
ugly.
Yeah, in all areas of life.
No
Yeah.
doubt, no doubt. But you're right with all these public speakers out here. You the worst thing you can be called is a hypocrite. So
Mhm.
you got to start right there, figuring out who you are. Because so you use the word platform a couple of times,
Mhm.
and when people think of platforms, they think of Zoom, they
Mhm.
think of Skype, they think of a blog, they think of social media, they think of all those things as a platform. You're looking at the platform right here. This is my platform,
Right.
right? Am I the same person in uniform, out of uniform, at work, at home, in front of friends, in front of colleagues, in front of people I don't know? Am I the same person all day, authentically who I am 24/7? Or am I putting on a show when I'm in front of the camera? Anybody can look up my social media and find me. I am the only Chaveso cook on the planet. Go look for me. Go look through my posts for the past 5, 6, 7 years or whatever, and you'll see you'll see the same stuff. This
Yeah.
is how I talk on social media. This is how I present myself at all times. There's videos and podcasts and stuff out there about me, and you will not see you haven't seen my position shift or change or me doing anything crazy out there because this is not a persona. My platform is this weaponry right here, which is my mouth. And my character and beliefs and all of that stuff are right behind it.
Right. Yeah. You're fantastic. So you are the only Chevy cook on social media. So I will just tell them where you're at. So I know you're on LinkedIn. You have a fabulous LinkedIn. So we got a lot of career people coming up in these classes. Your LinkedIn is phenomenal. If you don't want to check him out for the talks on race, check him out because the LinkedIn is good. Okay. And that is a great place for you to network. So you might send him a request on LinkedIn and let him know that you've seen the video.
Yeah,
Also on Facebook, I see you there. And then do you have more, I assume?
I do. So on those two, I'm more reactive and interactive. I have a passive account on Instagram where I'm just kind of a receiver.
Mm-hmm.
So you can find me on there, Chaveso MM, because it goes with my military mentors account. And you can also find me on Twitter. But again, that's a receive mode. I'm just kind of in there
Yeah.
looking for what's going on. And you can find more information about me or my nonprofit on the actual website itself, militarymentors.org. Again, if you Google my name, Chaveso Cook, Chaveso COOK, that's I'm the only one there. So you can find me out there. And as Joe Booth will tell you, like we met at a conference a while ago now in the spring. I'm not hard to find, one, and two, if you reach out, I actually do respond because that's how
Yeah.
we have stayed connected.
Yeah.
We've even talked on the phone and all that stuff and have never physically met in person. So I think she could tell you that, this is an authentic connection. And that also speaks to your future engagements as a public speaker. Like you can say, well, just reach out to me, and then you don't.
Oh, yeah.
And there,
Problem.
your credibility, you're a hypocrite, right? As we just talked about. You can look at my LinkedIn. I got a friend that works at LinkedIn who helps me manage, what it looks like and how I update it and all that good stuff too. And yeah, I'd hook you up with that resource as well if you wanted that type of connection, or if you just wanted to talk to me about, well, how did you set up your page? I'm down for all of that because at the end of the day, that's the extension of the platform, and we all need that as good public speakers.
Yes. So good. Thank you so much for speaking to all the students. I think this is a conversation that could last years. And it will. And
Yes,
but we
it will.
touched a little bit on it, and hopefully students as they encounter these conversations with others and these feelings that are laid on their heart to speak about, that they can reach out to you for further
They can,
wisdom.
of course.
Absolutely. Okay. Thank you so much. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Jovette. I appreciate it today.